We are live. Oh, we've lost Cindy. This is perfect. We are live. There, she's back. And this is Pi Ware. Hello, the director of Skin Deep, the Battle Over Morgellons. I'm going live here on Facebook Live as well. And it looks like that's good to go. This is a Q&A with Cindy Casey, who participated in the documentary Skin Deep, The Battle Over Morgellons. Cindy is the director of the Charles E. Holman Morgellons Disease Foundation. She puts on, with her organization, every year the Morgellons Disease Conference in Austin, Texas. And we're super happy to have you, Cindy. It's good to see you.
Well,
How you doing?
thank you for the intro, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for organizing this.
Sure. I haven't... I've talked to you on the phone a few times, but I haven't seen you in person since our October premiere in Los Angeles when Skin Deep was at the Awareness Film Festival.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's been October. Yeah, it's been a while.
How have you been?
Been doing okay. You know, a lot of anxiety with everything that's going on, and all the social distancing and everything. It's a little bit, it's a little bit much sometimes, but I'm hanging in there. I'm doing pretty well, and staying with my mom up in Missouri and looking after her for a little while.
Right on. Yeah, the social distancing and the COVID coronavirus pandemic has been a real kick in the teeth for society. I want to welcome everybody out there joining us either here on Crowdcast or on Facebook Live. If you are on Facebook Live watching this live, you can join us and ask questions live right now. You can head over to crowdcast.io/piware, and you'll see the event for today, and click on that, and you'll be able to jump right in and ask questions down at the bottom of the screen. And you can also take our polls. There's some questions to answer. And you can participate in the chat, which is, I don't know which side of the screen it's on, but you'll see it there. And feel free to submit questions, which we'll take. But first, before we get to the questions that y'all have submitted, I had some questions for Cindy Casey. And let's kick it off with this question about the definition of Morgellons disease, because I think that's a big issue when dealing with Morgellons disease. When you do an internet search, you get different people's ideas about what Morgellons disease is, whether it's a conspiracy theory, whether it's a man-made thing, whether fibers are present, whether they're not, whether they have motility, whether they don't. What is the Cindy Casey, the Charles E. Holman Foundation definition of Morgellons disease?
Well, Morgellons disease is a skin condition, a dermopathy, and its most striking characteristic is the unusual and brightly colored filaments that protrude from the skin or are embedded in the skin. And that's what sets Morgellons away from any other condition. Now, it's not only the skin. In addition to all of these skin symptoms, which many patients complain of, itching and biting and stinging sensations, burning, and most develop lesions, and these can be anywhere from mild to very severe, and they can be anywhere on the body, and they often are on the scalp, legs, back, like you saw me in the film, and they can just be anywhere, and they're very miserable, very disfiguring. Now, not all patients develop the skin lesions, but I'd say about probably 80% or more do develop skin lesions. Some just produce the filaments without developing a lesion. But in addition to all of these skin symptoms, these patients, and I can speak from experience, have all of the systemic symptoms of Lyme disease. So you have this profound fatigue. You're just neurologically just slowed with brain fog and delayed processing, sometimes balance problems and neurological issues, and the list goes on. Like every system of the body can be affected by this. There's two very polarized viewpoints about Morgellons disease, and the mainstream medical association, they pretty much think that it's purely psychiatric in origin. However, a whole string of studies now show that it is not. And in fact, it's the body's response to an infection. And Borrelia spirochetes have been found in Morgellons patients pretty much across the board. They're abundant in the skin lesions. They've been shown to be affecting the skin cells intracellularly, so they get inside the cells and create these filaments that are composed of collagen and keratin. And they also have shown that they can sometimes stain positive for Borrelia. The filaments can as well. So it's a very, very complex situation. And there's no wonder that people have a hard time explaining, when someone asks you, what is Morgellons? It's like, wow, how long have you got? You've got a couple hours, because it is very complex and it's hard to get your head around something so serious and complex that the medical community still doesn't acknowledge.
Yeah, I think people strive for simplicity. So people's minds, when they hear about a new disease, you can start to explain it, and people just, you know what, it's probably just crazy. Yeah, they turn off, and they either want to know it's like, all doctors are crazy and it's Lyme disease, period, or they just want to know, you know what, these people are just nuts, and we should just dismiss it because they just want attention.
Exactly.
And so there's this kind of human instinct to dismiss the complexities. And, in making the documentary, I found that you have to go in and parse out the complexities to understand the disease. It's not a simple one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, there's this connection between Lyme and Morgellons disease. There's sort of newer research, I'm led to believe, that suggests that there could be some other Borrelia-related conditions that are related to Morgellons. Is that right?
Yes. Lyme disease is just, there are several different species of Borrelia, firstly. And then Lyme disease can only encompass just, a few of these species. So there are other species of Borrelia, and they have been found in some Morgellons patients. So technically, some Morgellons patients don't have Lyme disease. They have relapsing fever spirochetes. And one of those is Borrelia hermsii. And there's a couple more that I can't think of. But, we find that, they say, no, you don't have Lyme. And patients will even tell me, well, I don't have Lyme disease. And, I didn't know if I had Lyme disease either, until a lot of more direct methods were used, because the Lyme test, the serology, has been so flawed that it misses over half the cases. And in Morgellons patients, it seems to miss even more than that. So don't think that because you have a negative Lyme test that you don't have Lyme. But these other species of Borrelia can also cause a very similar illness, exactly the same, actually. We have the same symptoms as Lyme disease with relapsing fever spirochetes. So, and some of us have both. I happen to have both of those. So,
well, it's interesting. I think before the coronavirus pandemic, people might be reticent to believe that there's so many false positives, or false negatives, I should say, on the test, where you go and you get a test and you test negative for Lyme disease. And then I think everyone would believe, like, well, if you got a negative Lyme disease test, you must be negative. That's what the test says. Tests don't lie. People lie. So There's a prejudice against that. But I think since there's been such wide coverage in the news of how people who have been infected with the coronavirus go and they get a test and the test is negative, and yet they then later get symptoms the next day or a few days afterwards, people start to understand the limits of serology, the limits of testing the blood and looking for antibodies, which isn't evidence of the disease, it's evidence of your body fighting the disease. So I think in the case of Lyme disease, if you get bitten by a tick on your skin and there's Borrelia that is sent into your bloodstream, your body doesn't necessarily start the fight right then. So if you get a test, it could test negative. And then the test itself, whether or not it's been 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, the test itself isn't very sensitive. Is that right? What is it? What is the problem with the test for Lyme disease?
Um, well, the test isn't very sensitive. And the other thing is Lyme disease affects our immune system. So
Mm.
when you have diseases that affect the immune system itself, you can count on that we're not going to make antibodies like we should, that would make us positive on this test. So I think, and probably with a lot of other immune conditions, they may not react right on a Western blot. I'm not sure. And these are all things that I never knew as a nurse. I never looked into any of this. I knew very little about Lyme disease and thought, well, I didn't know if I had it, and then my test was negative, my serology. And doctors would, before they even tested me, they wouldn't even test me. They would say, oh, you don't have Lyme disease. A lot of doctors get real hostile about Lyme disease. And so I came into this blindly, not knowing, because my background was critical care. And even though I've had tick bites, as a child a lot, I never really thought much about the fact that, Lyme disease is so prevalent until it
Yeah.
happened.
So you were a nurse at the time, and you're a registered nurse, and you were the head of a critical care night shift in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken. And we covered some of your story in
Yeah.
the film. So if for every the listeners and out there, the viewers, if you haven't seen the film, please check it out at morgellonsmovie.org. Skin Deep: The Battle Over Morgellons. We delve into the controversy of Morgellons disease, and we do so through looking at some patient stories, and Cindy is the prime story that we follow. The the thing about Cindy's story that was typical of some families, but not typical of others, was the support that she got from her husband. So you got the disease, and then Charles E. Holman, you met, you guys fell in love, you got married, and he became your advocate.
Right.
Now we cover that story in the film, and it's a beautiful love story. But I know we couldn't cover everything. We only have 90 minutes to tell like the history of Morgellons disease and also patient stories. So we didn't get into some of the um, early efforts. We got into a couple, but not that many. Are there any early memories of
Well,
that involved Charles advocating with
there,
you or for you that you could share that maybe the viewers haven't seen in the film?
let me think. Yeah, there's a lot of them. I know, it seemed like it was such a long period, but really it was a short time. Like Charles and I had only been married for 3.5 years when he
Mm-hmm.
passed away. Um, so this happened like right about the time we got married, and Charles he had my back on everything. He would go to the doctors with me, and once I figured out, oh, there's going to be a problem, he would start going to appointments, and I worked at the hospital, so I had seen a couple of derms that were affiliated with CPMC, the hospital where I worked, and we began to write letters to. I went up the chain to my nurse manager, and then above that, and above that, and we finally got up to the CEO of the hospital, and wrote letters to him about this hospital is unable to diagnose one of their very own. And we really got nowhere with that, but we started to get meetings at the hospital. And one of the meetings, we thought we would meet with the research department, and they agreed to meet with us. And Dr. Stricker happened to contact Charles at some point, and he said, I'd like to go with you on that meeting, because he was very supportive of our efforts at that time. And he did go with us. He's also affiliated with the same hospital, so he did go with us to that meeting. It was
And that's CPMC. What does that stand for?
California Pacific Medical Center. Yeah, in San Francisco. So he did attend with us, and we tried to talk them, into doing research. And I even showed them my lesions. At that time, my legs were broken out and really bad. And I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures and in the film, but they said, well, you would have to come up with a lot of funding, and we would have to design the whole study. And at that time, I was so sick, I barely made it over there to the meeting. So anyway, we didn't have any funding at that point, but that was one of the early things. And Charles did so many things. One, we had a meeting. We set up a meeting with Dianne Feinstein. Well, actually, we met with her staff in their
Mhm.
San Francisco office, and Charles wrote a whole packet in there, and the first PowerPoint that was ever made about Morgellons, and some brochures and information and letters from a few doctors. There were only 5 doctors in the world at that time that believed in Morgellons. So, boy, you talk about feeling alone, out there. It was like, oh my gosh, I remember, hearing about another patient in San Francisco, and I would look up and think they live in an apartment up there somewhere, just trying to think of someone you could talk to and about this. So it was, we had 5 doctors, and I mean, and they wrote letters, in support that they had seen it and everything. So, and Charles just did so many things. At one point, he wrote letters to every congressperson in the United States. I mean, he would just bump one letter out right after another. And we started a whole campaign, of writing letters. And that's what got the CDC to finally, they developed a task force. And over a period of several years, they did a study, or they called it a study, an investigation. But it turned out really bad, and it nearly nailed our coffin shut by it kind of silenced the whole Morgellons community. After that, the media would not listen to any of this. They didn't want to broadcast any of it. So we couldn't get the word out anywhere. It's like the CDC just squelched everything. And it was a really dark time. And, and that was several years later. But yeah, Charles was a big advocate. All the things he did in the few years that he was with me, I think he came into my life at the perfect time, or I don't know where I would have wound up.
I wanted to cover many husbands and wives in the film. That was one of the themes, was about support. As I mentioned, you have a limited time. 90 minutes seems like a lot, but it starts to really constrict you with all the
Yeah.
ideas and goals that you have as a filmmaker. And I think it's important work that the film can do is to get out to families and show people, a lot of times patients will have a hard time convincing their family of the reality of Morgellons disease or the need for support and love and treatment, because the disease has such a bad reputation online. But a film like this can help family members understand. So, it's a third party that's made a documentary, and it presents both sides of the debate. And I hope it can be a very important tool in helping families come together and to feel the legitimate need for support, the kind of support that Charles lent you when you were struggling so horribly back in those early days.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're joining us, submit a question down below at the Ask a Question spot. There's a chat on the side. We're going to jump into some of the questions here that you all have submitted. The top of the charts here, we've got Cindy. What did you think about Dr. Feldman? Dr. Feldman is the dermatologist that we follow primarily in Skin Deep, the Battle Over Morgellons. We just did a Q&A with him a week ago. You can see all the Q&As that we've done. We've done Q&As here on Crowdcast with Ginger Savely and Edward Hu participated in the film, and Marianne Middleveen and Courtney Day. Those are all at crowdcast.io/pieware. You can see them on Facebook or even our YouTube page. So the question here is, Cindy, what do you think about Dr. Feldman? He examined you and he saw the fibers in your skin. He won't have them tested and insists Morgellons is a psychiatric delusional disorder consistent with the flawed 2012 CDC study. He denies the 15 peer-reviewed scientific studies. Can you launch a formal complaint for the purpose of protecting future Morgellons disease patients from being victimized and drugged with antipsychotics by him? Submitted by Lance. Thanks for the question, Lance.
That's a great question, Lance. And I was in disbelief of the way Feldman behaves and his attitude. And he is the most, I've worked with been around a lot of doctors in my nursing career, and I have never ever come across a doctor with that kind of condescending attitude and just crude, and he won't even discuss it. And actually, I believe that Feldman is the one with the fixed belief. He's got a fixed belief that this is all in our heads, and he won't even open his eyes to even look at the possibility that somebody else could be right, because he's always right. And I think people like that just, as Kelly said, should not be in medicine, Bubba.
There it is. All right, next question. This one, let's see.
Oh, I should answer.
Yeah.
We can't make a formal complaint because right now we are the underdog. That there's a lot more literature to suggest, and by a lot more powerful people to suggest that Morgellons is synonymous with DOP. So, we have about 15 studies now, and I mean, we're climbing and we're working on it. But, the thing is, Morgellons is just not recognized. So, um, you can't file a complaint against these people because they're doing what they've been taught, sadly.
I get a lot of folks on social media, getting very angry and saying, we need to take these fools down and file a big complaint, and there should be lawsuits, and very impassioned calls for action. And that's great, and the passion should be there. But
right.
I wonder about I wonder if that's a good path forward, to try and skip all the steps of building alliances, to skip all the steps of forming small actions that create paths to gaining power for the movement, and just trying to nuclearly destroy the CDC. Or what I'm trying to say is, folks out there, I think if you want to empower a movement, there are steps to take, and they're smaller steps. And that if you're trying to build activism within the Morgellons community, I think supporting folks like Cindy Casey and the Charles E. Holman Morgellons Disease Foundation is a great start, because you have to get a start, and then you have to build upon a foundation of activism before you can kind of wipe clean the slate of prejudice and dismissal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you think, Cindy? What would be some good steps forward for you as a Morgellons activist? What do you see that the organization could do, or that the community? How could the community support you?
There's lots of ways that you can support us. Sign up for the updates and just kind of trying to stay knowledgeable. That will help you and help everyone, and help all of us who are trying to get the word out. We need your support. So we hope that you might want to get involved in other ways. There's brochures you can print off from our website. Yeah, you can just download them right there, and distribute those at any health fairs or anywhere you go, dermatologist's office, anywhere you go. That helps to spread the word to other people. And I know lots of people also run into other people that they can see also have Morgellons. So stay armed with some information about Morgellons, and try and keep yourself up on the literature. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to contact us. And we hope you can attend our conferences, and because we need everybody to get involved. And we also want to form alliances with other organizations, as we have with Lyme disease organizations. And I think the bigger we can get the more people involved, the bigger the momentum. So that's our goal. So
where is the best place to go for someone watching this? Is it your website? What's the best address for them to check out?
Go to www.morgellonsdisease.org.
Morgellonsdisease.org. All right, and remember, there's a lot of different websites that are around that have similar names. So make sure you're going to morgellonsdisease.org.
Right.
And
You can also just go to www.thecehf.org, and that will take you right directly into our website. Morgellons.org, you're going to see a lot of extra pictures and stuff like that. So, but it will eventually take you to the website.
okay. So let's see here. This next question is submitted by Nancy Egger. It says, Pi, you have taken some criticism for some of the scenes you included in the movie showing people who are doing dangerous things to themselves or saying some things that lead you to believe they can have a certain level of mental illness. Can you address why you did that? And second part of the question, Cindy, how does the foundation deal with these patients when they contact you looking for help? Is the psychiatric component in some people a hindrance to treatment, especially since doctors all call us crazy anyway? That's a good question. So for me, the reason I included folks that had odd behavior and was a couple of reasons. One, it was the primary one is that when I investigated, I found that Morgellons disease, because it's ill-defined, attracts a lot of alternative understandings of what Morgellons disease is, I should say, and less than credible explanations. And so I think if we're going to turn the world's opinion around, you have to then address that idea. If you just say, this is the deal, Morgellons is real, not going to have anything to do with any other oppositional viewpoints, I think it's easier for people who are rational, normal people who can be swayed for them to dismiss your argument because it's so one-sided. I wanted to present something that says, yeah, look, there's disagreement, and there's also folks that in my investigation that I find claim Morgellons disease and certainly don't seem to have Morgellons disease as it's defined by lesions and fibers.
Right.
And I also found that there are folks who may or may not have Morgellons disease and have unusual behavior, who seem to be mentally ill. And that there also are people who definitely have Morgellons disease as defined by lesions and fibers and all the systemic symptoms of Lyme disease, who also have odd behavior because of their physical state. And maybe the infection's gotten into the brain or they're so worn down. Just as, the mind is affected by lots of illnesses, so is the mind affected by Morgellons disease. So it's a complex answer and it's sort of a three-parter. And I just wanted to be honest and upfront with my investigation into this disease, and honest and upfront with what I found and what it means. And that's the reason I included them. So the second part of the question, Cindy, was how do you deal with folks that contact you looking for help if they've got psychiatric manifestations?
There, no matter what kind of manifestations, we give them, a link to help them find a doctor. And there are definitely some that actually require some psychiatric intervention before they can even get on a protocol, because many of you know that it's hard to stay on these protocols. It's a lot to remember to take all these meds. It's kind of overwhelming at first. And luckily I had Charles who would dole my meds out, but I don't know what I would have done without that. And so people that don't have that, and people with the more severe psychiatric symptoms just can't even deal with getting on a protocol and doing the diet, and doing, whatever supplements they're going to take and staying on these antibiotics and making sure they get enough sleep and all of these kinds of things. So sometimes seeing a psychiatrist is a good thing. And, psychiatrists are better than dermatologists. They're more Morgellons friendly, and many of them, have acknowledged the Morgellons and said, your main issue here is physical. It's not in your head. So, yeah, some people require that, and sometimes it's just very difficult to help people. There are some people we can't help. Some people, they contact us or just get very argumentative, and they have all the answers and we don't know what we're talking about. And so there are some people that we just say, okay, have it your way. We're we're okay over here, so, but we do stick with science, and I think that's how we've managed to maintain at least some credibility, because out there in the world, you need credibility, to be able to explain this to a doctor and to teach others about it. So that's been really important to me, is to maintain some credibility. So we're pretty mainstream science people.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take another question here. From Jeremy Murphy.
Hey, Jeremy.
Morgellons has been, hey Jeremy, Morgellons has been diagnosed in patients regardless of microscopic observation and solely to establish a rapport between them and the physician. Does this interfere with advocacy efforts? Are there several people who think they have Morgellons because their doctor told them they did, but they really do not? That's a good question. Cindy, what do you think?
I can't really recall meeting somebody with that story right off the top of my head, but I think that probably does happen. And I don't know if you've met anyone that has had that, but that's such an unusual thing where the doctor tells them they have Morgellons. I hear from a lot that doctor tells them they have Morgellons, but in the doctor's mind, that Morgellons word means delusions of parasitosis. So you got to really be careful here, because these doctors are getting tricky. You got to watch their literature as much as you watch the literature from our direction, because they're teaching that to use that term to establish a good rapport with your patient. Just say, okay, you've got Morgellons, and that helps you to get the patient to take the antipsychotics that you're going to prescribe them. And so it's real tricky here what doctors are doing. So just be very aware of that. But that's an interesting situation that you described, Jeremy. And I imagine that probably has happened, and you may have met some that fall into that category.
Next question is, hi, Cindy. Thank you for your great work. This is from Lance. Lance has a lot of questions on here.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I've lost this. Thank you for your great work, Cindy. Let's see. I just lost this question. Stand by, everybody. Here it is. Why does the CDC completely ignore you and all the peer-reviewed scientific research on your website at, and he even includes the link, the cehf.org/research? Have you ever contacted them directly, and what did they say to you?
Yes. Well, I was in contact with them quite a bit before they did their study. Now, after we've got all this research, we just happened to notice the other day that Michelle Pearson, the leading author of the CDC paper, she's still on our mailing list, because I get her out of office responses every time we put out any news or anything. So I always kind of chuckle like that. So yeah, she knows what we're doing, and they're very well aware of what's going on, and they don't want to acknowledge it. Just like the American Academy of Dermatology does not want to acknowledge it, and nor does the Infectious Disease Society. And so we're just up against a lot of brick walls. So I'm not sure, that I think I put that in a written response. I'm not sure I want the CDC involved again after what they did to us with that.
Oh, that's a concern, yeah. It occurs to me that about this idea of brick walls, there was an ambassador of dermatology. Her organization always escapes me. It's like it might be the American Academy of Dermatology, or it might be the American Dermatology Association, or some similar organization. And she saw the film and gave us a nice quote, because she believes in the film and has seen Morgellons in her patients. And the idea that there's a dermatological brick wall, I don't necessarily believe is very solid. So there's going to be holes within this brick wall, right? And I think there could be, with advocacy efforts that you're making, Cindy, with hopefully this film that can get out there and start to change people, or change people's minds, or at least have them take another look at Morgellons. I think that these brick walls, even at the CDC, as we get younger doctors who are more open-minded, that brick wall may start to get holes in it, that there's bricks missing here and there, and this information might start to trickle into the organizations.
That's exactly right. And we're getting a lot, lot more holes, and even dermatologists. Some university dermatologists are on board now. The holes are, and the walls will come down. It's just a matter of time. We get enough holes in them.
Yeah. So I encourage the viewers out there to don't think about Morgellons disease and sort of binary characteristics, either like everyone believes or everyone doesn't. I think it's a long process, and it's a step-by-step process, and you change one mind at a time. And I think that keeping that hope and that optimism and that idea of incremental progress is key if getting Morgellons recognized as a legitimate disease is your goal.
Hmm. Yeah, it's baby steps, and it's been baby steps all the way. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it gets depressing, and then other times you think, yeah, we're going to get there. And, so it's just up and down like a roller coaster. But we've made so much progress when I think back where we were when we had those 5 doctors, so.
Speaking of progress, the next question that I pulled up here is about ILADS, and it was asking about the film. But before I take that question, I want to ask you about like your progress as getting Morgellons disease accepted within ILADS. Now, if you don't know what ILADS is, it's the International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society, which is a huge organization filled with tons of physicians, and they advocate for research and treatment and education of Lyme disease and chronic Lyme disease. You may or may not be aware that the chronic Lyme disease debate has been raging for a long time, where the medical industry used to say Lyme disease is easy to treat and easy to cure, and if you have chronic symptoms that last beyond the 2 to 4 week treatment with antibiotics, it's probably in your head or some other thing, but it's certainly not Lyme disease. And chronic Lyme disease advocates have been complaining for decades that their symptoms persist regardless of the small window of treatment with antibiotics. So ILADS, they have conferences every year, and Cindy, you've been going to them for years as a Morgellons disease advocate. Can you talk to us about what kind of progress, what it was like at the beginning? Like, did everybody not believe in Morgellons disease? Were you able to make progress?
Like I was an alien from outer space when I
Is
first.
that right?
So it's been a gradual process, but I am so grateful to ILADS and the opportunities that they have slowly provided to just let us in, slowly and surely, and take a look at what we're, talking about. And as time has gone on and the more research we get, ILADS has been wonderful at allowing a venue for us to educate doctors, for doctors who treat Morgellons to speak at their conferences to lots of doctors. I know Ginger Savely has spoken at several ILADS conferences, and Dr. Ebony Cornish has spoken at several, as well as Melissa and Raphael Stricker. And all of these people just bring the message to the physicians. And ILADS has really been wonderful in helping us to be able to help doctors understand Morgellons and treat Morgellons. I think it's a good organization. I joined ILADS in 2005. It's interesting. Charles wanted to join, but he's not in the medical community, so they wouldn't let him join. So he was a little bit bulled up about that for a few days, but it turned out okay. So I'm just an associate member as a nurse because it's mostly doctors, but I feel like I'm privileged to be a member of such an outstanding group of people. They gave me a lot of hope in the beginning. They taught me a lot, and they've helped me to teach others. And so that's it's a valuable thing.
I first learned about ILADS when, as we began to follow you with our cameras, and you were going to an ILADS conference, we ended up going there and found that there was a receptive audience to the Morgellons disease material. Just as filmmaker, we wanted to find out, who's going to respond to this? Where can we get support? Because
Right.
as a documentary filmmaker, you have to do fundraising, and you have to find areas of support, a community that needs your message and would like to support it. So we showed a piece at ILADS, and in a couple, I guess a few, it was both a place for us to shoot and get material, and then sort of show material and reflect it back to the community. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, iLads did give a grant to Skin Deep, and they showed the finished film in November 2019 in Boston at the iLads conference there. So yeah, they've been supportive of this film, and that was that was the extent of the sponsorship of the film. Was a grant that helped keep the budget going and helped keep us traveling, which is very important. I know every once in a while on social media, people will sort of lash out at us and say, like, this should be free. Why are you charging people money for this information? It should be free. And I completely agree with that sentiment. It should be free. We should be just distributing this film wide and far for free. And we shouldn't, in fact, we shouldn't even have to make the film. The government should just give this information to everybody. And that's a beautiful ideal. But the truth of the matter is that, if you make a documentary film, you can't make it for free, and you have to hire people, and you have to buy cameras, and you have to buy airline tickets and pay for meals and eat and travel. And so it's a lot of those expenditures. If anyone out there is wondering, like, why we're charging money for a film that's supposed to help people, I mean, that's the reason. If there weren't the economic realities of making a documentary film, we wouldn't charge people for this information. If we could just magically make it for free, or if there was a benefactor who gave us, the entire budget of the film, I would have released it on YouTube, last year for free. But we are living in the world, and there are realities that we need to face. Speaking of realities that need to be faced, how many, asks Lance, Morgellons disease patients are there in the US and worldwide?
Well, we don't really have a good count on that. What most people have calculated is that since two studies showed that 6% of Lyme disease patients develop Morgellons, that, it would be 6% of the Lyme disease cases, which is about 340,000 cases per year. So it's been estimated that there's about 20,000 new cases of Morgellons per year. But I'd like to encourage everybody while we're on this topic, it is important that we get numbers. And we relied on Dr. Randy Wymore at OSU for years because he had a system where people could register and we could get not names or anything like that, but just a little bit of some demographics and numbers. We need numbers because numbers are powerful. And that registration with OSU ended just a few years ago. And so now what we have on our website is called Morgellons Global Data. It's a very basic thing because we couldn't spend a lot of money to get, the really long questionnaires like they've done with Lyme disease. Someday we hope to get there, but we're not yet. But it's just very brief. And if everybody can just fill that out, and your information is never ever shared with anyone, so it's all it's very safe to do, and it just takes a few minutes. I think it's 10 questions. You do have to create an account, but it's called Morgellons Global Data, and you will see that link on our homepage. So that's how we hope to get a little more information about Morgellons and some numbers that we can use, because that's the first thing officials are going to ask. Well, how many people have this? And if we can't gather the numbers, then we're losing power right there. So that's another way you can help us, is tell everybody, put it on your groups and on all the Morgellons patients on your chats and everywhere that you can think of, that please contribute to the cause by filling out that Morgellons Global Data.
Great. I have a question for you, Cindy. It's about Joni Mitchell, and the reason that I'm going to ask it is because as a filmmaker, when you start making a movie, everyone always asks you, like, are there any celebrities who are going to be involved? Because that changes the audience, and I see it just on social media, like the idea of if you can pin your cause or your film to a celebrity, the eyeballs that look your way are vastly greater than just bringing a cause or just a documentary film to the market without a celebrity. I mean, it's night and day. And so far, the only big celebrity that's admitted publicly to having Morgellons disease is Joni Mitchell. Do you have any experience with talking to her? Because she did not want to be part of the film. I never actually got to talk to her. We approached her several times, but she wanted to remain private. So what's your experience?
I have had several conversations with Joni Mitchell, and she's a great person, such an interesting person. And she was reached out to me as someone to talk to, because you think of Joni Mitchell as having all of these friends. I mean, she has all the friends anybody could ever dream of having, and yet she had nobody to talk to about Morgellons. So she would call me, and sometimes we would even have an hour conversation, or an hour and a half or 2 hours. And this was back before we knew a whole lot about Morgellons, and but back before she had the aneurysm. I haven't heard from her since the aneurysm, but we had some long conversations, and very deep, and she helped me give me a lot of clarity about things, and gave me a lot of advice here and there. And one thing she said is, "Oh, never ever read your reviews. Never ever. They'll either hate you or they'll love you. So just don't ever read the reviews." But she's a funny person, and I know she cares about this cause, but I don't think she's had that many symptoms since the aneurysm happened. And her doctor did contact us, or contacted me at one point, but it's been several years ago. And at that point, Joni was doing pretty good. And I don't think that she wants to have much to do with it. As Pi said, she hasn't been returning his calls or anything to help with the film.
Here's a question from Lance again. Cindy, what will the next scientific studies on Morgellons disease be focused on?
Well, right now there's ongoing project that's going on with Dr. Eva Shoppy at University of New Haven, and that is a study that's looking at any other microbes. We found Borrelia, and Dr. Shoppy has found H. pylori before that cohabitates with Borrelia, but these will be some more intense and special studies to look and see if there are other pathogens that are associated with this, because we know that in a lot of the skin samples there's been mixed infection. So, Borrelia spirochetes may not be the only culprit here. We may have other pathogens. And so she's just doing a lot of in-depth studies to try and see what else may be contributing to creating these fibers. And I also wanted to mention that it's not only fibers. I've heard people say, "Oh, they're just all about the fibers. There's more than fibers." Yes, there is a lot more than fibers. And even though we create fibers, we create all kinds of strange things that come out of our skins. So don't think that we only focus on fibers, because I mean, we have the seed-like little things, and which are actually turn out to be follicles, but we understand it a lot better now. So I think that's why we focus on the follicles. We understand big hunks of keratin that are hard and feel like a piece of plastic. And we understand things that come out that feel like fingernails coming out of your skin. And they're the actual texture. I mean, they're hardened keratin, which it's just like a piece of fingernail coming out of your skin. Some patients think, "Oh, that's plastic," but keratin can come in so many forms, and depending, there's a lot of different keratins and a lot of different collagens, and that subject gets way over my head, but it gets really deep. So there's so much more research that needs to be done so that we can just better understand how what role Borrelia plays. We think it is likely to be associated with the cause just because of all of the evidence we have for that. But there may be other microbes that are right in there contributing to this too. And we want to understand the whole picture. So back to the question, yes, Eva Shoppy is working on that to look at other microbes that may be involved. And there's some research also going on in Canada, up in New Brunswick at the University of Mount Allison, in the lab of Dr. Bette Lloyd. and her student Julie Lewis. And I think what they're doing some more intensive studies on the fibers themselves. And they're also looking for other microbes. And they had been uh, dabbing a little bit into trying to induce Morgellons in mice, an animal model. So there's some exciting things going on. And they hope to be able to grow in tissue, some start Morgellons to grow in tissue cultures. So these are things that we dream of and hope that are not too far away.
Yeah, if they were able to grow tissue or grow Morgellons fibers in tissue, that'd be a real game changer for the scientific community.
That would just seal the whole deal.
Yeah. Here's another question from Lance. This is, do you know of any patients who can prove that they once had Morgellons disease and can now prove that they are 100% cured? And have they been cured of chronic Lyme disease as well?
No, I can't say that I do know of anyone in that category. Number one, they don't usually use the word cure, unfortunately, with chronic Lyme disease, because there is no test to determine that you're cured. There is no test that can tell you that you no longer have this bacteria in your body. So, and with the nature of Lyme disease and Morgellons, it tends to wax and wane. It's up and down all the time. So you can be going through a good spell. And I was myself was even asymptomatic for 6 years, a long time ago. And then it all came back, so it just depends on so many factors, the state of your immune system. And so I don't know of anybody that's cured. And when we hear that word cured, that should send up a red flag. And also about these snake oil people that are selling cures for chronic Lyme, that should send up a red flag too, that they may not be legitimate.
Well, at the same time, we should say that there are people, while you can't claim 100% cured with a scientific test, that do seem to have gotten a lot better through treatment. So if you saw in the film, Edward Hu is somebody who's greatly benefited and joined us for a couple of Q&As and talks about being asymptomatic after antibiotic treatment. And I've talked to some people who have been, they consider themselves cured. Now, it's not a scientific definition of cured because, as you say, there are no tests. But
Yeah,
I talked to several people, and the thing that you have to understand with Morgellons is why aren't, the question would be like, well, if there's so many people who feel cured and they no longer have symptoms after treatment, why don't they talk about it? Well, it's, again, because of the Morgellons disease prejudice that exists throughout the world. They don't want to jump out onto a public platform and jump into like a documentary film and say like, hey, I had this disease, and have people misunderstand that as, oh, you're crazy, right?
right,
So there were so many people that I've talked to that just were not willing to go on camera, but that had definitely benefited from treatment from a physician like Dr. Raphael Stricker, or nurse practitioner Ginger Savely, or nurse practitioner Melissa McElroy Fessler, who you mentioned earlier. Folks who have benefited from treatment from somebody.
yeah,
So I want to just make sure that if you're
yeah.
feeling
Like,
hopeless, you should feel hopeful.
yeah, be hopeful, because I do know lots of people who are symptom free. So I hope I didn't sound too dismal in my answer, because pretty much all patients can get better. It's just a matter of how much better they're going to get. But I know many who say, "Oh, I don't have any symptoms whatsoever. They're back to their jobs and their normal lives," and so that's pretty amazing.
Terry Smith has a question. Cindy, how are your lesions now after all this time, and how or what got you better?
That's a good question. And my lesions now are mostly all scars. I have one lesion here that's, I'll just show it to you right there. And that one's been a booger here lately, but it's not as bad as what I've had in the past. So it does produce fibers occasionally, but that's the only one I've got. So when I go from being covered in this stuff to only having that bad boy right there, I think I can kind of deal. It's to a point where I can manage it. I have stayed on treatment. So it's been many years that I stay on a regimen of 3 antibiotics, and um, and I attribute a lot of it to that, uh, the antibiotic treatment, and just being so consistent with it. It's been, geez, over 6 years that I have taken antibiotics, and no, that's not what an optimal thing to do. But when you're faced with being covered in lesions and no quality of life, or am I going to take these antibiotics? And feel, halfway functional. I'm going to choose these antibiotics because that's how I can feel pretty functional. But that's the state of my skin. I still struggle with brain fog and fatigue and delayed processing, and um, just some of the neurological things when I'm tired, especially. Those kind of show up even more so. But overall, I'm so much better than what I was at one time. And I'm so grateful for that. And I can thank Ginger Savely for that and for helping me through some of the roughest times of my life. And I'll forever be grateful.
The next question comes from Renee von Vetem. I hope that's a pronunciation that works for your name. Sorry, Renee, if it's not. It's to Cindy. Cindy, I'm setting up a Morgellons Foundation in the Netherlands. Could you email me at, well, then he provides his email, Renee at morgellons.foundation. Would love to connect. Thanks for all the great work. Also, not so much a question as so much a request. But let's talk about the expanding global Morgellons awareness and the efforts that are being made overseas.
That's something that I really love to talk about it, because it's so inspiring to have like this whole global tribe that we've created, in so many countries. So we've had 2 Morgellons conferences in Germany. Petra Hahn is she has kind of my role, only she's German. And we have Australian uh, Morgellons communities. We have the people in the UK, and it just feels like we have such camaraderie, and it is becoming just a global effort. And I feel like the more of us get involved and hang together globally, that the faster we're going to get things done. So maybe we can put pressure, because it just amazes me that, it's not only this country that denies the reality of Morgellons, it's everywhere. And we've heard from patients from all over the globe. And just like Lyme disease, it's everywhere. And so it's also denied everywhere. It just is kind of mind boggling when you think about it. How can the whole world deny something that's so obvious to us, and the evidence is right there?
Great. Let's take 2 more questions. Sarah Victor says, I have Morgellons. If this is the main reason I believe I need Lyme plus co-infection tests, how do I get that across to a doctor without mentioning the M word, which I have been advised never to say when seeing a doctor? It's hard to explain why I want tests and treatment based on my skin symptoms and my belief where it came from. Every time I mention the M word, the doctor shuts down.
Well, the best way is if you have a doctor that that you have seen for many years and that you're familiar with, and that they trust you, like a family doctor or something, that someone who knows that you're not crazy. Because I had the same experience as you. I can't imagine going into a regular doctor and saying, "Just would you test me for Lyme disease?" Because they're going to say, "No, you don't. You're not a candidate for Lyme disease, and we don't have Lyme disease here, and the ticks don't cross the state line," and all these crazy things that we hear. So, yeah, unless you have a doctor that or unless you find an ILADS doctor, an ILADS doctor will be happy to test you for Lyme and the other tick-borne diseases. So, and there may be a few other doctors out there too, but I wouldn't go to infectious disease. They're the worst, and I don't know if you had the right dermatologist. We have a few that would be friendly about doing that, but most would not. It's kind of funny that my dermatologist in Texas actually thought, "Oh well, I'll just test this patient for Lyme just for fun," but she's not going to have it. And sure enough, she came back with a positive Lyme test. And I was so, the patient contacted me because he couldn't tell me because of HIPAA, but then I hit him up about it. So it was kind of a beautiful thing that happened. Like, see there, if, some people do test positive, but and a lot of people like me and a lot of others that probably had this for a very long time test negative. So that makes it a little trickier even to prove that you have it. So
For those looking for a doctor, where
advice for you, Sarah. I mean, to do that, but because it's hard to go in there and just have them look at you like you're crazy.
well,
I'm trying
where would they go
in
to
New York,
find?
Mike.
So if there's a patient who they want to get a doctor who will test them for Lyme disease or that will treat them for Morgellons disease, where would you recommend that they find that doctor?
We answer questions like this all the time and help people find doctors. There are some doctors that we know off the top of our heads, but we don't know off the top of our heads doctors in every state. So most of the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society doctors are educated about Morgellons and are able to evaluate you and treat you for tick-borne diseases. And that is the treatment for Morgellons, is to treat the underlying infections. So we give people the link to the ILADS website, and there is a provider referral on that website. We also tell people to go to LymeDisease.org, and they also have one, and so does the Lyme Disease Association. And these are all great websites that can also probably provide you information about other local Lyme disease associations, which often have support groups, and most of these are familiar with Morgellons, and you might meet other Morgellons patients there. Since we're just 6%, we're so small, there are hardly any active support groups out there for Morgellons. But if you team up with the Lyme organizations, they do have support groups, and there's a lot of online support groups. So go to ILADS and use their physician referral or one of those other organizations, or you can contact us. If you contact us through the website, you'll hear from Denise Moudray